Interesting video for you guys here today. I have the brand new 2026 P14s ThinkPad loaner from Lenovo. I also have the previous generation, 2025, also a loaner. I've had this one for a really long time, but I guess it worked out in the end because they sent me this one and now I can compare them. This is my laptop. This is an E14 2025 model. I actually was going to do like a full dedicated review just on its own. The E14, is it good or is it bad? But I've decided to kind of rope it into this because it's nice to compare. You know, we have kind of the top spec 14 from Lenovo, the P14 or T14s. And then we have like one of the more budget-friendly offerings from Lenovo, which is also surprisingly good this year. So we'll rope them in here. What has changed this year? Well, okay, the 2026 model here has a Panther Lake CPU. So they went from the Arrow Lake, which was kind of a mid-range power in terms of like how efficient it is, how powerful it is, right in the middle. Awesome CPU. I use Arrow Lake in my primary laptop. But now they've went to the Panther Lake, which is a successor to the previous generation, Lunar Lake, which was the one that was, 3-day battery type stuff. This is the successor to that. So we still get that 2 to 3 day battery type stuff, but we get the same type of CPU performance as something like this, which is a huge boost. We also get a lot of the other nice things that you can get between them. We end up getting access to that really good iGPU from Intel, if you want that. You can also spec this out with an RTX 500 Blackwell or 1000 Blackwell if you need it. Lots of different changes as well. In the end, it's a true ThinkPad, but let's see if it's worth your money, if it's worth upgrading from last gen or potentially something different. How good is it? Do I like it? Let's check it out, and we'll also compare it to one of the more budget-friendly offerings and see if it's worth jumping up to the premium one. Okay, let's have a look at the PSRef document here. We have this year's model and we have last year's model. So the actual ports, we'll look at it in a moment, basically exactly the same. Thunderbolt 4. I would like to see companies start moving towards Thunderbolt 5. So we can see here, last year we had the Core Ultra Arrow Lake CPUs. They're all H branded, which is good. That's the good stuff. Very capable CPUs. Intel started cooking here real big. You end up with the Intel Arc iGPU, which is pretty capable, honestly, good for professional stuff and even some light gaming, no problems whatsoever. But generally speaking, these are very capable CPUs. Today on my model, I'm going to be working with the 285. This year, however, we have some pretty interesting stuff going on here. We have the Panther Lake chips here. Now, you can see here, it's the last digit, 6, 6, 6, 6, and then this one has an 8. When you're looking at 6 in the last digit, you end up with a very mediocre iGPU, which is fine. It's just a very, very mediocre GPU, just basically for standard use, Windows, that kind of stuff. When you get the ones that have that 8 in the last socket there, you end up with the big boy, the B390. This is an incredibly capable iGPU from Intel. I've done a lot of tests. You can check out my channel. I have lots of handheld tests with this and a few laptops as well. It's a monster, offering around RTX 4050 level gaming performance, and then, of course, very capable in other areas as well. So today, if you're going to be getting a model that does not come with dedicated graphics, this is a very good pick because you're going to get that powerful CPU and that powerful iGPU. If you don't care about the iGPU because you just don't care, or because you have the NVIDIA model, any of these are going to be fine. Today we're working with the 386H, which is quite powerful. Last year you could see you ended up with the 130T, 140T, the Intel Arc. This year you can get the kind of crappy ones here, or you can get that really monstrous iGPU. That's going to be a huge performance boost over these over here. And in both models you have the Blackwell 500 and 1000, 6 GB and 8 GB. I today have 5000 on this one and 1000 on this. We're going to be able to do a nice comparison between them. Screen options are interesting. You have a low spec model, 60 Hz, 1200p, 45% NTSC, kind of nasty. They both have it. It's meant to keep costs down and battery drain down. I actually do have that on the ThinkBook E14 today, so we're going to be able to look at that screen. We have access to this one here, the 1600p screen, which was actually scrapped in 2026. It was a pretty nice screen, 1600p, 100% sRGB, 90 Hz. Pretty decent overall, but it looks like they just scrapped it because it's kind of a middle of the road here, and they ended up going with this one here, the premium screen, which both of them did have. This is a really good screen. It's 3K IPS, 500 nits, so it's brighter, higher color space, 100% DCI-P3, and 30 to 120 Hz VRR, so very impressive. So let's jump in here and have a look at these laptops. Okay, so here's the 3 laptops that we're going to be looking at today. We have the P14s 2026 revision with the new Panther Lake chip. The previous generation, P14s, essentially the same type of idea, but this one here has the Arrow Lake. So there's going to be very similar laptops. It's basically an iteration. So they went from Arrow Lake up to Panther Lake, which performance-wise won't be hugely different, but you are getting some benefits of the Panther Lake chip, which we'll go over. And then this is just a totally different laptop, but this is mine. So these two are loaners here. This is mine. This is an E14. The E14 is very considerably improved this year. It's actually quite a nice laptop, but you can see it's quite a bit different as well, despite being ThinkPad-like. So we can see over here that these look functionally exactly the same. There is quite literally no difference between them. There is difference on the internals. One tier lower GPU, one tier higher GPU, and different CPUs. So I do want to check the weight, if there's any difference, which I kind of doubt, but you never know. So the previous gen with the Blackwell 500 is about 1,700 grams, approximately. This generation with Blackwell 1,000, so one tier up GPU as well. Oh, it actually is slightly heavier. 20, 30 grams. Could be the RAM, could be something, but it's ever so slightly heavier. Now here is a E14. Now, of course, this won't be as heavy because it doesn't have dedicated graphics. It's a little bit thinner in that because it doesn't have to be, it's easier to cool. So around 1450, and that makes sense. It's not quite as thick, not quite as robust. Looking at these here, they are functionally exactly the same. I mean, there's differences in specs. There's all kinds of differences here. But in terms of the chassis, you could be forgiven for thinking they were the exact same laptop. One difference here, you can see the E14 has the Lenovo kind of embedded right in. This is, the current generation, although it's a few months old, it's current. This is the current generation of P14s embedded. And then the previous generation of P14s has that little metal badge there. So it's interesting. That's one of the ways you could, I guess, identify it right away. Bottom. It is actually quite a bit different, to be honest. So that's the bottom of last gen. Right? It had a full metal grill across it with the intakes there. Here we actually have intake, and the fans actually look visibly different. So I'm actually going to have to definitely open them up and have a look inside. And the E14, which is, I think this is technically the most budget. It might be the L14, but they're pretty, like, same idea. It's actually a slightly different material. This is a slightly glossier, ever so slightly glossier. This is a little bit more textured. And so this little bit of a texturing here actually, it gives it a little bit more of a fingerprint resistance than this here. Otherwise, there actually is also a difference to the keys. The E-series ones have like a little bit of a texturing to the keys here, whereas these are smooth. I don't know, maybe it's quicker or something to process these keys or something like that and costs less. It's a slightly different, and they even feel a little different. Lower tier. So they feel a little different. Also on the inside, of course, we do have some other differences. Speakers, just the little guys here, firing up on the E-series. Here they're firing down. It's also taller, right? This looks a little bit different, but it's generally similar laptops. I mean, they're both ThinkPad, so they're gonna have ThinkPad-like keyboards. Just that little bit of a texturing is different there. Last year's model looks like it didn't have, at least this specific SKU, didn't have a smart card slot or a SIM slot. It's interesting, this one does. That's cool. USB-A on both, Ethernet on both, Kensington lock slot on both. Back looks basically the same, more or less. Left side, they're exactly the same on this side. No Thunderbolt 4 on these. No Thunderbolt 5. Thunderbolt 5 is only on the T1G, P16, and P1. Otherwise, looks good. We'll bring in the E-series just to see what happens if you get a cheaper model. Not much, not much. Still get a Thunderbolt. This has dual Thunderbolt. This has one Thunderbolt. So you lose a Thunderbolt, but it's otherwise quite similar. And then the E-series is like the last generation where it doesn't have the smart card in that too. Now they are a little bit different. We'll bring in these here. Again, this is lighter. It's also slightly smaller. Okay, so like that there. Right. Same general chassis design. The E-series is just ever so slightly smaller than the P-series. Just a little bit. Right, like that's curved a little bit. It's a tiny little bit thicker. I mean, it makes sense. There's NVIDIA graphics in here to cool, so there's more cooling needed and everything. So it's a tiny bit thicker laptop. It's also a tiny bit bigger front to back. Not much, but a little bit. Right, and then if you bring it up this way, it's a little bit wider that way too. So they're actually, I mean, slightly bigger, right? 14, basically 14 class, but they're not exactly the same size, and that's interesting. So it's not just that they're taller, even the top-down profile is smaller on the E series, which kind of makes sense. I mean, it's not quite as powerful. They have all this other stuff in here, so the P series are going to be a little bit stronger. So we can see there we got a little E and P burger. Very good. Okay, so let's have a look inside the laptops. We'll do the 2 metal bottom, however. That's a lot of structure in there, holy crap. Okay, come to this one here. There's a lot of structure in here as well, actually. So tons of structure inside both of these. They're just placed differently. Metal bottoms on both of them as well. This year actually has a battery, like a foam piece that sits on the battery. That just helps prevent from impacting the battery. It's always a good idea, but there's a ton of structure in here. Interestingly, you know, the vents are different. This one has a full vent layout. This one has a smaller one, maybe to potentially direct air a little bit more effectively into the actual fans, potentially. That's a crazy amount of structure. Yeah, it's really weird. Anyways, so there's a reason that these are so different in terms of the insides. And we can see last year versus this year. The first thing that stands out is the memory type. So on the right here, because this is Panther-like, it's going to be using CAM memory. You can also use solder and that kind of stuff, but you have CAM memory over here. So CAM memory is awesome because it's very fast. Now we are in apocalypse, so RAM is like a luxury in general, but I mean, I don't see CAM memory being any more expensive than SODIMM memory. And CAM memory is, I mean, it takes up less space. You can see that it takes considerably less space on the motherboard for huge capacities. So that's, you know, 64 gigabytes of RAM. That's a ton of memory there, and it's a tiny little thing. It also runs a lot faster. SODIMM can't run as fast. So that's the first thing that we see there. We do have WAN on both of them as well. So we have a WAN slot over here. You know, no difference in the WAN slot there. It's in the exact same spot. We do also have a single NVMe on both of them, so exactly the same. I would like to always see, you know, a second one, but in this case, is because they're professional laptops, they do have the cellular, so they have the WAN. So there's not really anywhere to put it. Big batteries on both 75 watt hours. They're not the exact form factor, but they are the same type of battery. There's actually a speaker upgrade too, so we'll just angle that so you can see both. This year's model does have a slightly bigger speaker. See that there, slightly bigger speaker. So you do actually get a little bit, it's not quite as, it's not in the exact same position. This one's on a little bit angled as well. So you might get a little bit more reverberation. This is coming, you know, on these here, it's coming out the front. This is coming out the side, but it is a larger speaker. So it should, in theory, sound better. We'll have to see. So that's that there. So both of them are going to be dual heat pipe. But we can see here that the fans are ever so slightly different. The diameter of the actual fan box appears to be about the same. Right? Like that's basically the same, but they're actually not the same fan. This one has a deeper kind of like depth to it. It seems to be a little bit taller, but the actual like fan blade, it's hard to tell if it's actually smaller. It might not be because of the casing. It's hard to see. It might be potentially a little bit less fan length though, because you can see it has a bigger central thing. So that little central node there is bigger in diameter, larger in diameter than that there. So the actual fan blades might be slightly smaller, but they actually do appear to be slightly more dense for one thing, and the actual shape of them is different. The height of the fan is taller over here than it is over here. By how much? Maybe a millimeter, half a millimeter, something like that. But the actual, you know, air displacement should be somewhat similar between the two of them, despite those fan differences. So, you know, I don't expect any real thermal difference. These are both RTX enabled laptops, so they both have the CPU and also the GPU. The difference here, though, Panther-like gets the same performance roughly as Arrow-like with lower watts. Because this is actually not a successor to this at all. These are not in the same category. This is a successor to Lunar Lake, the low power stuff, like the very, very low power stuff that's gonna be very efficient. Lunar Lake, if you remember that, super, super, super good battery. However, the performance is massively better than the previous generation. This is Arrow Lake, mid-range Arrow Lake. This successor is not out yet. It'll be out and it'll be Arrow Lake, but Arrow Lake and Nova Lake, when it comes out, are meant to be higher watt. Higher watt means they run hotter. This is more efficient. So despite the fact that these, I mean, spoiler for the video, will have very similar levels of performance on the CPU, this one requires much less watts to get there. So it actually doesn't need as much cooling. So we'll actually see if, you know, these changes make any difference. But in theory, I actually suspect this one will actually run cooler, even with the slightly different fans, because it's just a more efficient system. So that's very interesting. So this looks great inside. I mean, it's quite upgradable, obviously. I mean, you can't change out the Wi-Fi. I guess that's one thing, but it has good Wi-Fi. SSD, easy to upgrade. RAM, I mean, it's CAM and it's decked out. You're not really going to be upgrading this, but maybe in a few years when things settle down, sure. And you can add a WAN slot. This one didn't come with one, but you can add it. So really nice inside. Let's bring in this here. This is the E14, and this is very impressive as well for such a budget offering. We'll just do a comparison. Lenovo is stepping their game up quite a bit here. This one actually does have dual NVMe, which is crazy, but it doesn't have Wi-Fi. It doesn't have cellular. So rather than having a WAN slot here, we have SSD slot. So I populated this. I added that. That's the one that came with it, and then I added in this just because more storage, whatever. So it came with 256, which is fine, not a lot, but a little bit. And I just added a 512, whatever. Very good. Slap it in, easy upgrade. Battery is obviously a lot smaller here. They actually, I think that they offer a bigger version of this battery that would be basically full there. So weight would go up, cost would go up slightly, but you get more battery. So it's just a chunk missing out of there, and it would just sit on top of those ribbon cables, no problem. But 48 watt hours. It's not the biggest on this model, this specific configuration, but it is Arrow-like. It should still have pretty good battery. Wi-Fi is also upgradable here. Now this has a different setup. It does not have RTX graphics. It does have the same CPU as that, which can run a little warm, but it has a massive fan, massive. One heat pipe, but a reasonably thick heat pipe and a huge diameter fan. It's a thinner laptop, physically thinner than both of these. So the height of this fan is lower, but it does have a big one in there. And it also uses SODIMM. So if you're comparing this to, that's a really soft material. If you're comparing this to the previous generation there, I mean, same type of idea. You're getting dual SODIMM on both. The P series here, you get the P series here being a little bit more professional focused. You do get WAN. This one you get extra storage, that kind of stuff there. A pretty big difference, obviously in this here where you're going into CAM memory. The E series is always one generation behind. That's how they do it in terms of the CPU. So this now has Arrow Lake. We're on to Panther Lake now. I suspect that next year, 2027, or very late in this year, probably very late this year, at the very end of the year, like December, they'll potentially maybe re-release this with Panther Lake. It's hard to say. The market is really bad right now, but they would normally be one generation behind. However, being one generation behind is not a problem because Arrow Lake is so good, right? It's just a slightly different setup. So that's looking pretty good inside, honestly. Just pretty linear upgrades this year. CAM memory is the biggest thing here. Otherwise, some just general tweaks overall. Speakers, little upgrades here and then. That's typically what Lenovo does, rather than overhauling the whole freaking thing. Every now and then they just do tweaks to get things a little bit better each year. Okay, now let's have a look at the keyboards. I mean, these are ThinkPads, so you're going to get ThinkPad keyboards. I mean, they're going to be basically best in class. Fingerprints are going to be an issue with these. You're going to get bad fingerprints, especially this style here, where it's like a significantly more, darker, smoother texture. You are going to get pretty bad fingerprints. The higher end stuff is a little bit more resistant. Like you can see it does have fingerprints. I haven't wiped this down. I've done like 2 days worth of work on it. You can see they will get it, but it's much more resistant. You can see that there, whereas these are pretty bad for fingerprints. But the nice thing is, I mean, you give it a quick spray, quick wipe, and you'll be able to get the fingerprints off real quick. Just give them one of those, and the fingerprints will be gone, basically. But, they're generally prone to fingerprints. So if you're very particular about that, the black style ThinkPads are pretty bad for that. You could get into something like a Yoga and that really eliminate a lot of the fingerprint type stuff. So we'll do a quick typing test. Obviously, these are going to be good, right? These are ThinkPads with ThinkPad keyboards. What do you expect? They're a little different though. This has that kind of texture to them. This one is very smooth. It's hard to describe. In both cases, they're going to have the same rough amount of travel. They do feel a little different though, so I will talk about it. You can see here, lower profile key cap, but good travel, lots of travel. Snappy. Of course, it does have backlighting. I think, these you can customize with backlighting. Some ThinkPads, you have the option of customizing them. Some of them just come with it. This one does not. And you get stuff, like fingerprint and lock and all that kind of stuff. But so they don't actually feel the same. So we'll actually type on this like cheaper one here real quick. Do a quick type. Over here. Yeah, so I mean, there's a reason why ThinkPads are legendary. They always have been legendary for their keyboards. I mean, IBM back in the day had the IBM Model M, and their keyboards were legendary now. Then they made the IBM ThinkPads, which had legendary keyboards. Then Lenovo took over, and they used the traditional style for a while, the scissor switch, and now they moved to the more modern chiclet. But throughout this entire history, the ThinkPad has had incredible keyboards. That has not changed. Okay, these are incredible keyboards. If you are looking for a keyboard where you can sit down and work all day typing up essays and doing that kind of work, it will be almost impossible to beat the ThinkPad. I ever so slightly might prefer some of the very top-end yogas, but it's so close that it's probably just because I use the top-end yogas and ThinkPads more often that I've become a little more accustomed to it. They're both, incredible. Lenovo makes the best keyboards on the market. The trackpads are very different than a lot of different laptops. You can see here, we'll go both of them. They're actually kind of very muted. They're not gummy, but they're not sharp. The reason is Lenovo puts ThinkPads, I mean, they're often used in professional environments. The last thing you need is these things to be loud. If the keyboard was loud, it would be annoying. If the trackpad was loud, it would be annoying to other people. I like sharp trackpads that are loud and clicky, or even haptic can sometimes be louder than this, but it can absolutely be annoying when there's a lot of people around. And imagine a lot of people. It can be very annoying. So they have made these quieter as a result. So they're generally going to be quite nice trackpads, but they're not going to be as like they're haptic on the X9, for example. Those are like more nicer trackpads to type on, but it's supposed to be like that. Now it also does have the track point. You may think, what is the track point for? Well, obviously, it's a mouse and a trackpad alternative. So what it is meant to do is rather than, you're typing here, especially if you're a touch typist where your hands are locked in and you're typing, if you use a trackpad, you have to bring your hand down to navigate and go back up. Or if you have a mouse, you'd come over here, move the mouse, and come back. Back in the day, the track point was created so that people didn't have to come over here, use the mouse, come back up, come back down, and you have to reset every time. There's a time delay and you have to reset. Whereas when it's this, you literally just move your finger over and you navigate around, left click, right click, scroll, and you can immediately come back up, right? Very minimal amount of movement there, whichever finger you use, very nice. You can just do that. It's rather than coming down here. So if you're editing a document, it is actually very useful to be able to, just quickly come into the document here, just use that kind of thing, navigate around, even just quick, website type stuff. But if you're a true touch typist, it can be very fundamental and foundational to have the track point, which is why people love it. So very, very, very nice. Okay, let's do an audio test now. So we have this little track here. We'll go through a couple. I do expect this, my assumption, best, medium, worst, but they're all going to be fine. ThinkPads back in the day actually had kind of crappy speakers, unless you got the really halo stuff. But they have been each tier has got better. The really premium stuff has gone up quite a bit, but even the budget stuff has gone up quite a bit. I think they realized that even if you are using these in a professional setting, you're not doing the consumer, it's a professional setting. If people are doing meetings, they're watching videos, they're doing conferencing. So good speakers actually are important, regardless of the consumer base. There's almost no situation where shitty speakers are acceptable, because even if you're just using it in a basic work environment, you need decent speakers, because you have to listen, you have to do meetings and that kind of stuff, right? Of course, if you're watching shows and that kind of stuff, it's hugely important, but we'll come in here. So we'll run one at a time. So we'll run this one over here, 50%. Reasonably loud at 50%. I mean, immediately better, but. A little louder, it sounds very different, but a little louder, but not much. I mean, Lenovo tunes these for work environments too, so they shouldn't be, blasting your eardrums off at 50%. It's a little pitchy over here, but. It's pretty loud. Yeah, it's loud enough that I wouldn't be comfortable having that on my lap. with it at full volume. Yes. It's a huge improvement this year. So these are okay. I mean, again, the cheap ThinkPads, I'm comparing them to the cheap ThinkPad, like the budget lineup, the E and the L from like 2 to 3 years ago, which had, oh my God, the speakers were so bad. They were almost unusable. This is very standard consumer fare now, like mid-range. I wouldn't, if somebody got this laptop for me and I was using it, I'd be like, that's fine. Right? It actually is legitimately fine. There's no problems with it. However, it does definitely lack the richness and the boldness, especially the bass. It doesn't just really have that. There's a big jump here, huge jump going over here. A lot more of that low-end bass and just richness. It just feels richer. They're not any louder, like in terms of peak volume, but it just sounds significantly better. However, this year is it's a huge improvement this year. This is getting into like serious territory. These are very good speakers. There's a lot of richness at that low end. You can just kind of, I don't know how the camera and the microphone will pick it up, but there's that bass track here. It's just picking up here. Can't hear it all over here. You can just kind of pick it up here. It's there. And then here it's forward. It's forward. So if you're looking at, audio, it's serviceable. These are good speakers, I would say. These are actually like pretty decent for like, ThinkPad especially, consumer business type thing. In terms of the business lineup, it's actually very good. These are now competing with like creator level. This is a really good set of speakers. Okay, so we're gonna do a screen test. Let me just kill off this light here. So we'll do a screen test here. You can see these screens are actually not off right now. Like, see, there's actually something in the background there. It actually is pretty good. Like there's, that reflection actually looks way more pronounced for you guys, that reflection there. I can barely see that. It is an anti-glare. If this was, a non-anti-reflective screen, it would be a freaking mirror. So I'll bring in my phone at the same time to show you guys what I see. So I see something like that there. These are good, like it's good contrast ratio, right? These screens are on right now. This is not off. They may look like they're off, but they're not. They're actually on. They're not OLEDs. I mean, these do not have OLED blacks, but notice the distinct lack of glow. This one has glow, a little bit of, that's exaggerated. I've turned it up now. It doesn't look like that in person, but I just want to show you, these premium panels, see there's no glow on them. See how nice that looks? This one does have a little bit. Again, it's exaggerated. What I actually see is probably, let's get it exactly what I see. I probably see about that. Just the tiniest amount of IPS glow on that. It's a lower end screen, right? And then there's none. In a black room, if I made this room completely dark and I put them beside an OLED, yeah, you'd notice the difference between them, obviously. But it's very good. Look at that spec. So what we'll do, oh, that's in the video. I forgot. Okay, so what we'll do here is we'll come in and we'll play these. I'm gonna have to have my phone up because there's gonna be a big difference here. So look at the color space here. The center one is DCI-P3 color space. 100% sRGB, a scene that has, someone's skin tone and then some other stuff too. So, I mean, you can really see this is a 45% NTSC screen. It's not capable of showing the same level of reds, right? It has an orangey pinkish tone to it. It looks actually a little worse in camera, or in person, sorry. On camera, it gives a little bit of an orange. In person, it looks even more washed out. It's slightly pink, just the way cameras are. They're not as good as a human eye for specifically color, obviously. But you can see here it's just not quite capturing it, right? Like her skin looks all right, I guess, but the reds are they're just not there, right? Now, these two here are both very good screens. Now, you don't have access to this screen anymore. It's an sRGB screen, but you may be comparing this to a different laptop, a different ThinkPad. Many ThinkPads do offer an sRGB screen. I will never complain about an sRGB screen. For content creation, graphic design, that kind of stuff, you actually want to work in sRGB. This has a mode to do that, but you want to work in sRGB because it's just the standard. The de facto standard for doing that type of work is sRGB. It's not quite as dramatic, but it's more representative. DCI-P3 is in some cases actually over dramatic. It's incredibly rich. This absolutely pops off the screen. These reds are like a rich royal red. Even her skin, you can even notice it in her skin tone as well, looking a little bit more like, I don't know, there's more blood in it, I suppose. I don't know, she probably looks more like this in real life. Like this is probably how this person looks. This is like slight warm tone to it, but it's pushing into those reds a little bit more. You can, of course, put them in different modes. When it comes to content consumption, though, you can't beat DCI P3. It's going to be so much more rich and versatile. It just looks incredible. Of course, you know, then the blacks come here, come here. I wish the camera, it's hard to show these things on camera. They're the human eye, right? Like I work in remote sensing and that kind of stuff. It's the way cameras, like that does not look right. It looks way more pink in person, significantly more pink. But the camera just can't do it justice. And you can see here, right, just how nice that is. So very good. We'll just pause it here. You can see that not only does the DCI P3 color space affect reds, it also affects greens. Some of the other colors not so much, but it really does push into the green more. Now again, that might be slightly exaggerated. Green is not quite, I mean, these plants, they could be that green, but it's pretty unlikely. That's incredibly vibrant, almost like abnormal green. This is probably more accurate. That's probably what you're actually seeing there. So again, sRGB for, you know, creating more accurate type stuff, you typically go with that. But nothing will deny how beautiful it is to enjoy a DCI P3 color space screen. It really pushes into it. It's also this video here is being displayed in sRGB, so it's over dramatic. Like this is not, I'm doing this on purpose, so put it that way. I want to make this more dramatic so that I can emphasize the point here. It wouldn't be this dramatic in real life, but I really want to show you guys just like this physically can portray more colors. Over here, yeah, this looks way worse in person. The camera makes it look significantly better. It looks dead. Like the plants over here just look dead straight up. They do not look alive. I'll put it that way. Yeah, they look way worse in person. It's hard to describe, but it just, you know, they just don't look alive. Put it that way. They look dead. So yeah, I mean, by far the best screen for me to enjoy is the one in the center. That grass actually looks dead, like straight up dead. It's not supposed to. This looks a little overdramatic and like nuclear. That looks probably more natural. So, I mean, there are advantages to DCI P3 screens, there are advantages to sRGB screens. There's no advantage to a 45% NTSC screen other than potentially it's cheap. Okay, now I've already done a bunch of performance testing on these. I'm just gonna rope you guys into it now. Performance modes on these are a little different. Some laptops from Lenovo, you can do what is essentially like function Q, and that'll change the performance modes, balanced, performance, and silent. Here, it's actually legitimately tied into Windows. So when you come here and you go best performance, balance, and best power efficiency, it will affect the amount of watts that the system can put in, that will put into the CPU. It'll affect fans, noise, thermals, performance, everything. It actually makes a big difference. It's just the way that they do it for the ThinkPad rather than having a separate type entity. Anyways, so we'll come in here and we'll run them. So this has the 366H. Actually, this is idling lower, interestingly, just slightly low. I mean, it's Panther Lake, right? So we're idling around 40 over here, we're idling around 45 over there, and over here we're idling at around 50, all right? So, so you can see around 50 over here, 50, 55, under 40 actually, and 45. And I mean, again, the same chips here, so this is better cooling than that, just a bigger, robust cooling system. The big difference here is that this is Panther Lake. Right, so the CPU here will idle, you'll see when we get to, you know, like when I talk about battery, but the true idle of this system is actually approximately 0.5 watts on the CPU, 0.5 watts. That is half a watt, 50% of a wattage. It's very low. Over here, the idle is significantly higher. It's still not bad, that's really high, but it's, you know, Windows is doing crap. But typically this will idle around 5 watts, maybe 6, something like that for Panther, for Arrow Lake, right? On the 285H, it's just the way that it is. Over here, kind of, you know, it's kind of the same, you know, 5, 6 watts or something like that. So this is many times more efficient, many times at idle. Intel is absolutely destroying AMD right now, right? AMD has not innovated. They don't have anything. Their chips are refreshes of refreshes, sometimes of refreshes, right? Even their most like modern chip, the Strix Halo, is more than a year old now. And it's, you know, high wattage thing. The Gorgon point and all that kind of stuff, it's just refresh of refresh of refresh. Intel is now more than a generation ahead of AMD. This was a generation ahead, potentially kind of close to the HX370. It was a competitor, a little bit better overall, but it was, you know, kind of around the same generation, just better. This is now a full generation ahead of AMD, and AMD doesn't have anything coming out. They don't have anything. So now Intel is just, you just buy Intel. There's no point in buying AMD unless there's a very specific reason you would want to buy AMD, such as running, I don't know, like SteamOS or something like that. You don't buy AMD right now, or if it's way cheaper. But it's not. AMD is more expensive than Intel. I don't understand. Anyways, moving on. So we'll run some performance here. We'll check thermals and noise. Okay. So they should, I mean, these are the same chips here. Technically, this one should be more capable because it's a higher wattage offering, better cooling. Over here, we should be getting roughly the same performance as the, the better Arrow Lake than the weaker Arrow Lake here, but we'll see. Immediately significantly noisier. The fan kicked on right away. These fans aren't on yet. Again, less robust cooling, so it kind of makes sense. We are throttling, obviously. It's a pretty, it's not the highest watt either, but it's also not the thickest laptop. We are flat as well, which would make a difference. But you can see here, the immediate dump was 45 watts. This one's happy to dump in about 37 watts, which is not a full wattage on the Arrow Lake, not even close. This Arrow Lake can go way higher. I have this in my Lenovo Yoga 9i Pro, and it's like 2.5 times the wattage. As a result, that single run here is around 15,400, which is still very good. Burst processing, still very good. But the Arrow Lake, it's not running at full capacity at all over here. Coming over here, you can see there at no point was it throttling. It was getting pretty close, but it was not throttling. Then the fans just kicked up. And now under full load, we're sitting at 80 degrees. It's also higher watts, right? The burst on this was 72 with the sustained being 50. And as a result, the performance is much higher, 19,710 for that first burst. So almost 25% faster. It's literally the same chip, but it runs cooler and it has a higher amount of watts it can dump into it. So this is close to what a peak Arrow Lake can do. I think technically you could maybe get slightly more if you give it a little bit more watts, like 55, 60, but it wouldn't be much. You'd be up to like 20 to 21,000. It's very close. My Yoga 9i Pro can do better than this, but it's also a significantly larger laptop with higher watts. So, but this is good. This is very good, right? 20,000 is like mid to upper range desktop level performance. Right? There's not a lot of desktop CPUs for consumer level that can beat this. You're getting into like, the 16 core Intel, 16 core AMD or like 20 core Intel kind of stuff. So it's very good. Now here's the Panther Lake. I missed the burst there, but it was just even without the burst, the raw performance is actually functionally higher than that. So it would have been higher, and then it comes down with that initial burst. That's how they do, because we're sitting here at 65 to 66 watts burst, and it's 60 watts sustained overall, and it's Panther Lake, so it has roughly the same performance as Arrow Lake. They're kind of close, so those extra watts actually make it a little bit more powerful, and it's sitting around 20,000, 5, 6, 7% higher. And that's the full run. If we actually come back here and we look at the sustained over here, now it's gone down to 18,700 versus 20,000. So it's just straight up a more powerful CPU, more capable CPU in this case, because it's offering the same rough performance, but then it has the other benefits that we'll get into a little bit later. Let's come back over here and see where we're at now. It should have dropped, and it has 13,000. So it's a pretty modest offering of an Arrow Lake. Let's be honest here, though. This is a ThinkPad E14. Like the budget lineup, and this is really good for like this lineup here. A lot of times they only offer like the 255U, the U series stuff, which is just like Raptor Lake refresh. So the fact that they put Arrow Lake in here is incredible because you get a huge jump in iGPU performance, more modern chip, more modern features, and it's not using a lot of watts, right? We're only at 32 watts. Let's see where we're at here in terms of noise. I can hear it, like there's no pretending that I can't hear it, but it's pretty quiet. .44 dB, I don't even know if it seems lower than that, but it could be right. Like it's just such a low-pitched noise, low-pitched sound. I think it's the design of those fans, having that curve, like those multiple curves. It just cuts down on air turbulence, right? It may not move necessarily more air than the other designs, but it does cut down on noise turbulence, like the irritating sound. Okay, and here's a look at the thermals here on the different laptops. On the left here, you can see it's reasonably cool. I mean, my skin temperature is around 33 or so. So it's not going to really, you can't really even feel it, to be honest, if you put your hand on there. A little bit of warmth on the screen here, but honestly, it's not that much. Then on the main one here, the P14s 2026, same idea. A little bit more heat on the screen there just based on where the location of the fans are. Keyboard deck, no problems whatsoever. I'm not concerned about the thermals on that screen, by the way. And then here on the E14, a little bit warmer, but still it's not going to be hot. It's still under 40 degrees there, so it's not going to feel uncomfortable for the hands. But again, it's a little thinner laptop with a single fan, and the heat pipe is single, so it's a little bit more centralized. Overall, though, I mean, we're looking here that, you put your hand on these laptops, you actually use them, you're not going to feel that they're uncomfortable. You're not going to feel, sweaty hands or hot hands or anything like that. It's quite nice overall. So, I mean, it's getting the heat out of these laptops very effectively. Okay, so clearly the laptop is, I just turned off the thing, and it's completely silent under idle. There is no noise, okay? Like I have an ambient of 39 or so. There is literally nothing to hear. Is the fan even on? The fan is on, but you can't hear it. If you put the laptop on your head, you could hear the fans. But it is so quiet that I can't hear it. And look at that, 18,000, right? How many percent did we lose? I guess we were at about 20,000, so we lost about 2,000. So we lost about 10% performance. Now the fan kicked on. It took, how many runs was that before the fan kicked on? It took a minute and a half before the fan kicked on. Remember, my noise floor was like 38 to 39. It's like 1 dB above my noise floor. But I can hear it now. I couldn't hear it at all. There was no fan. Now there is fan. But it's excellent, right? And we're still running at a reasonably high watt, actually. Yeah, so you can see here there's a huge drop in performance, right? Huge. This one over here was at around 18,000 on silent mode. This is down, 14. We're down like 20% potentially, somewhere around there, potentially a little bit more. So it's a big drop in performance. Still good though, right? It's still good. 14,000 is still very good. It's actually technically it's outperforming the E14 on performance mode because it's using roughly the same amount of watts, but it's better cooled. So yeah, they're both very good, but there's an obvious and linear improvement between the two of them. So this is still an excellent laptop. If you're going to pick this up, I have no complaints about the performance here. Like I'm not crazy, but if you know ball, then Panther Lake offers basically the same raw max performance as Arrow Lake H chips, like it straight up. But it's also significantly more efficient. Another nice thing to consider here, though, is that these seem to be sleeping the GPU very well. Windows is a little bit of a menace when it comes to waking up your RTX graphics. So you can see here, it comes with Panther Lake based integrated graphics, or you can get 500 or 1000. We have 500 1000 between these two laptops. If you have the NVIDIA one, technically it should sleep the graphics properly and not wake them up, which means that the battery life is going to be extended. If the NVIDIA graphics do get woken up, if Windows decides to be stupid and wake up your graphics, it will kill the battery life a lot faster. So what I tell people to do here, and this is something that, this will determine what is using what. So we can see in here, like, camera, it's just using power saving. But you can force it to do something, because Windows doesn't always make the right choice. It might legitimately make the wrong choice. And typically it actually does that. These are slightly different screens. Well, they're not slightly, they're very different screens, put it that way. This is a much higher resolution. So 2560 by 1600, so it's a 1600p screen. This is a little bit of a weird resolution, but it's a 3K screen. And you can see here, I mean, as a result, it's going to use significantly more power just doing stuff. It's also 120 hertz versus 120 hertz versus 90 hertz. So under peak wattage performance here, this will use more watts to run the display because it's 120 hertz and it's higher resolution. So under the peak setting there, it's going to burn more watts. The thing is, the screens are very customizable. You can get various screens on these laptops. Screens are one of the highest consumption of power on these laptops under idle. Not as much on this because it does have less efficient chip. On the Panther Lake stuff, literally it is, because the chips are so effing efficient that the screen actually becomes the most power hungry part of the system, generally speaking. So you can see here, it's sitting between 1 and 2 watts, depending on what's going on. Over here, we're sitting between 5 and 7 or even 8 watts. So it's approximately 4 times more watts being used on Arrow Lake. And this is considered efficient. Like there's no one who would come out here and be like, 5 watts idle is inefficient. It is efficient, right? This is very good. Even if you get yourself like an 95 chip or something like that, it's still going to burn around the same watts on idle. They don't idle any lower. These are where you get into idle that's super low. Snapdragon and Intel, not AMD. Snapdragon and Intel. The Snapdragon Elite stuff and the Intel Panther Lake stuff and Lunar Lake are super efficient. So anyways, you can see here, you know, we're idling at like no watts. So if we're just looking at the watts on the CPU, I mean, you'd be getting weeks of power out of this thing. But of course, there's other stuff at play, screen and all that kind of stuff. Now, I don't run battery tests at low, like 200 nit or like 130 nit brightness, because no one actually does that. You don't take your laptop into like a plane or you know, into a coffee shop or into your office on battery and run it at 100 nits. You wouldn't even be able to see the screen. Nobody does that, and I hate that kind of bullshit where it's like, you know, you're juicing it and you're like just fudging the data. No, it has to be real world data. People would put it into 60 hertz mode instead of, you know, full watt. People would actually do that. So that actually makes sense, right? But nobody's going to freaking run these things at zero brightness or anything like that. It doesn't even make sense. Okay, so let's check the actual battery now. So the battery is here. Give it a sec to figure out what's going on. Versus the battery over here. Again, we have the CPU is taking, depending on which one, quite a bit, and then the screens. Look at the difference though, right? 5 to 6 watts here idle. It'll update as we go here, but roughly 5 to 6 watts here. 10 watts, almost double, right? It's considerably more. The screen is taking more power on this than this here. Despite that, this is burning considerably lower watts. Why is that? Because the chip is more efficient. CAM memory is actually lower power than SODIMM, so that's part of it, but that's part of the whole package that we're getting here. We're getting the CPU and the CAM memory. The CPU is significantly more efficient and the CAM memory is more efficient too. So even though this laptop here has a much more powerful screen that is harder to drive, it's higher resolution, this is burning more watts than this over here because it has a more efficient chip. So, you know, just hanging out here, again, the system is not clean. There's bloat on it. It's not my system. When I get these systems, you know, I really clean up Windows. I get all the crap off. I let it run for a while, all the indexing and all that junk that Windows does in the background. Once that's over with, these systems here can idle as low as like 2 or 3 watts, maybe 4 watts with a screen like this, because you'd be getting about half a watt on the CPU, and then you'd be getting between 3 and 4 on the screen, something like that. It depends on the screen, but this type of screen would be about 3 to 4 watts approximately with all the RAM and all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, you're technically ending up with, you know, better battery life on the Panther Lake stuff over here. And that's the thing here, right? The chip here is much more efficient. So let's just do a quick bit of navigation here. Kind of just see what happens when you actually navigate, what happens to the wattages here. So do this one first. We can see the watts there because, I mean, again, the screens are a little tough because they're different. You can spec them out how you want. You can get a lower power screen, get a higher power screen. It's your choice, right? So like this, we'll go ThinkPad P14 Panther Lake. Let's see what we get here. Come in here, this will load up a bunch of graphics and that kind of stuff. And you can see, you know, it's an Arrow Lake CPU. So yeah, it's not as efficient under idle, but I mean, it's certainly not using a ton of power, right? It'll use power. It'll load in the graphics. It'll load in all the crap that it needs to load in. These are pretty heavy websites. And then it will go back to its base. So, you know, it went up to 10-ish. Yeah, about 10. Then it goes back, right? So it basically consumes 5 watts to do that task. All right, coming over here, it's using about 5 watts. You know, you navigate around. It'll use a few watts here to load, a little bit to load up that. Not much to open up a browser. It goes up quickly, loads the thing, and then goes back down. So they're both actually very efficient chips. It gets the job done fast because it's powerful, which then allows it to go back to its idle state. Therefore, it's efficient. The thing is, though, the idle state is considerably different between them. So yes, they are going to use roughly the same amount of power to do the same task, like it's using kind of similar amounts. Maybe, you know, it's hard to say exactly. I mean, there's so much stuff, so many things going on. But they'll use roughly the same amount of power for, like, you know, a quick burst type thing to get something set up, to have, you know, the website open, to do all that kind of stuff. It'll use roughly the same amount of power to do it because they're roughly the same power, but then it goes back to that idle state. I find slightly faster is one thing. So the Arrow Lake stuff, the Panther Lake stuff gets back to its idle state quicker. So, you know, it does the task that you both use, you know, 10 watts. And then it's like, all right, I can now power down. This one comes down a little bit faster. So that's one thing. And then, of course, the idle is significantly lower, you know, 4 times or potentially even more than 4 times lower watts. So it's way more efficient because you're not constantly doing stuff on the laptop. You're not loading it. You load something and then you type in a document or you browse or you look at the website, which doesn't use as many watts. So that's why it is so much more efficient in terms of long-term use. I will never complain about Arrow Lake because they were always great, right? Powerful to open the task and do the task, get it done quickly, then go back to your idle state, which is around 5 watts, right? 5 watts idle gives you an incredibly long amount of battery, 20, 25 hours of battery. Of course, you need to also factor in, the screen and that kind of stuff. So you actually end up with what I could still consider all-day battery. 8 to 12 hours on Arrow Lake, very feasible. The thing is here, with real-world use, you end up with significantly better efficiency. Potentially not quite 4 times because, the screen, all that kind of stuff, but probably 3 times the battery life. These will be laptops that will excel not just in day-to-day, coding-based stuff that's CPU heavy, but in real productivity type stuff. Engineering, Blender type stuff. I mean, it's not the highest graphical VRAM kind of stuff, but you can still do it. Engineering type stuff, GIS, and of course, creation type stuff. You have those very powerful CPUs, which will get the job done quickly, but then you also have NVIDIA graphics. If you get this model here with the Panther like X, the X CPU that has the B390, you'll also get a very powerful iGPU, which you can use to do stuff like video editing and gaming and that kind of stuff. So rest assured you can do that. But today we have the RTX 1000 and 500. They're kind of similar. I mean, they're both in the same, they're not really in the same class, I would say. They're one full class apart. 1000 and 2000 would be close. 500 is typically one full tier down. But one of the nice things here, you'll see here, is that you do get the, let's bring that down here. You do get 8 gigabytes on the 1000, 8 gigabytes on the 2000, you jump it up. Over here on the 500, you actually get 6 gigabytes, which may not seem like a lot, but it's bump. I mean, the 500 series in the past got down to like even 4 gigabytes. They weren't, very VRAM heavy. And, honestly, for gaming, unless you're doing really heavy gaming, that'll be a decent amount. And for productivity and that type of stuff, it's going to be a lot. Actually, it's going to be quite good. Again, you're not going to be doing game development type stuff on that. You typically would want to get into a gaming laptop or something, or a real high end, the like the P16s or something like the P16 non-S, the big boy with the 5090 equivalent Blackwell 5000. That kind of stuff would be a little more suitable. But you can certainly do some pretty serious. It feels really snappy. Obviously, these are going to feel very, very, very snappy. Drop them in there. Boom. Okay, and we're already able to play them. Right, you're able to play them basically instantly, right? Scrubbing through, nice and quick, no problems there. Like they're using the same type of encoders and decoders and the same type of architecture, not exactly the same. Panther Lake is technically a different architecture. So a little different, but they're same idea. So here we have 2 4K 60 videos, right? Editing's obviously amazing. So we'll come in here. We'll go like this, leave that there. Go like this. Go like that. So 4K, 60. Actually, technically it should be like that. Okay, very good. We'll actually turn this up. So I actually do high, typically, higher bit rate. So we'll come in here. I'm actually not sure. I haven't used the Blackwell 500 yet. I've used ATA 500. I do not know how fast this one will be. We'll see. We'll find out. That being said, they're both going to be pretty quick, right? This here is going to give you roughly the same performance as a very top tier iGPU. So the Intel B390, which is on that very powerful CPU offering that's on this, you can't even get it on this. It's going to basically match that. The thing is, this iGPU is just a 140T. It's not capable of encoding as fast as the Blackwell 500 here. So on this model here, getting the dedicated graphics will definitely be faster than the integrated graphics, because this is a previous generation integrated graphics, right? On this model here, if you decide to go with the Panther like top tier, the one that has the B390 iGPU, it would probably still be faster than this here. So this is a really nice laptop because you can get into the Blackwell 500, the Blackwell 1000, or you can get into that top tier iGPU. On this model, if you're doing stuff like professional tasks, because there's a pretty big gap there. If you're doing professional tasks like video editing, I would either recommend getting into the Blackwell 1000 here, because it's fast, obviously, significantly faster than that. Or I would recommend getting into the Intel, this is while that does its thing. We'll come over here. See this here? The B390 is a very, very, very capable iGPU. Obviously, it's not as fast in stuff like AI. This is the AI specs. But for things like just raw graphical capabilities, it's very fast. Okay, so we'll do a little game test. We're going to start on the Blackwell 500. Again, if you have this, the CPU performance is basically the same. So you could get this GPU in the other laptop. So we can just basically get a rough idea of how it's going to perform. If you want to know how the iGPU is going to perform, I have put out a lot of videos on the Intel Arc G3E, which is the same iGPU. So if you get this with that top 358, 388 CPU with that really powerful iGPU, you can just watch any of those videos. You'll get a rough idea of how this will perform on integrated graphics. And it's going to be good. So we'll come in here again, the 500. There we can see here. It's not able to, rip out like a high 60 or anything like that. It'll be probably somewhere around the same performance as the iGPU on the Intel, something like that. Maybe a little slower, maybe a little quicker. It depends on the game, right? Some games prefer some prefer the other. Now you are only getting 6 gigabytes of VRAM, virtual memory. So this game is rather hungry. You physically could not run this at one setup. You could not go to balanced. You must run it at performance because of the VRAM. You are not capable of going up one setting because the VRAM demand will go up and the performance will become absolutely atrocious. However, if you keep it under the VRAM amount, then it's going to be reasonably performant. You can see it's reasonably performant. Right? Probably somewhere around the iGPU, on the performant iGPU, which does make the Blackwell 500 a little funny. I mean, it does have still advantages because it is still, NVIDIA based. So, I mean, there are going to be certain programs and certain types of tasks that will prefer, the NVIDIA dedicated graphics over even a powerful iGPU, right? Even if you got, the Strix Halo stuff from AMD, it's still, there will be cases where Intel, there will be cases where, the NVIDIA is faster. And you can see here, I mean, performance bump with DLSS, but not a lot. Like, it's just the raw compute, right? Like, it's good, right? You will be able to play any AAA game, modern AAA game. This is native now, 1600p with scaling, but like native output resolution, native rendering resolution, and you'll be able to play any game really that there is without problems. You'll have no problem whatsoever. Even more demanding games than this. Most games are easier to run than Pragmata, like a lot, but even the most demanding titles will run just fine. Again, it's not really designed for that, but if you want to rip games, you're going to be just fine ripping them on the Blackwell 500, right? All right, so now we're into the bigger GPU. Now, because we have more VRAM, we have 8 gigabytes, we actually unlock one full level up. So this screen is a higher resolution screen, but we'll go with the same one just because I want to do comparative. This screen can absolutely do the native resolution, like this GPU, sorry, can do the native resolution without problems. Here, because you have 8 gigabytes, you can unlock balanced. But I want to compare the two GPUs, so we're going to start with that here. Okay, so we're in here now. Now, it's not going to be 50 times faster or anything like that, but it is going to be a more powerful GPU. See the VRAM's up a little bit here. Now we're getting native here, what we were getting on the other one with scaling, right? We were at balanced DLSS over there. We're actually getting, we're actually higher technically. So we're getting more frames here with a more demanding setting. It makes sense, right? We've moved up a whole GPU tier here. You can throw on things like scaling now. Of course, this is 1600p native here, right? It's a very demanding scenario here. If you are buying one of these for gaming, really all of them work. The Blackwell 500 is going to work just fine. The Blackwell 1000 is going to work just fine. Again, this is wattage limited, so it's not going to give you the full Blackwell 1000 experience that you could get on a big beefy laptop, aka the 5060. It's basically a 5060. That would be more powerful than this, of course. And then, of course, the iGPU, so long as you get the B390, would also be giving us, it wouldn't give you this much performance. Obviously, it would be closer to the one over here, but it's still gaming ready. So, again, not gaming laptops, but I think a lot of people who buy, ThinkPads these days or watching this in the future may potentially look at one of these laptops with, one of these specs and say, can I game on them? And honestly, the Blackwell 500, the Blackwell 1000, and the Intel Arc with the B390, they can all game very well. I don't have the B390 to test in this laptop. But maybe I'll put a link up here in the description up here, like a link up here to some of my B390 testing. I have a lot now. I have tons of experience with it, and you'll be impressed with how well it games. So regardless, you'll be able to game on all of them. Once again, the Blackwell 500 is a little bit of an odd man out. It's kind of just sitting in the middle. Now that we have access to such a powerful iGPU, it seems to be the odd man out here. Okay, conclusions. We could do the comparison stuff where we compare them, but let me just talk specifically about this one here a little bit, talk about the pluses and minuses. Negatives, there actually are no real negatives to it in terms of like being a ThinkPad. It's just a linear progression of ThinkPad. It's a better ThinkPad than the previous generation, and they're just getting better over time. So, as the ThinkPads go, it's still a true ThinkPad. It's just better now, has some better stuff to it. Now we'll talk about negatives in general in the light of laptops. ThinkPads can be very expensive, especially the P and T series because they're the premium ones. They come with ThinkPad warranty, which is a full step above, the generic warranty from Lenovo, which is still already very good. But ThinkPads have their own customer support, like premium ThinkPad customer support. This is actually a thing. So support and warranty is even a higher level. So you're buying into ThinkPad not just for that, you're buying into the ThinkPad branding, right? That's why a lot of businesses buy ThinkPads, because they get that. But even as a consumer, if you buy it, you can get into that premium ThinkPad warranty. ThinkPad service. I know some of the people who watch this video are actually, considering these as a business as well. There's an advantage to that. You're buying into the ThinkPad warranty, ThinkPad support. So if you run a business, especially if you grab a bunch of these and you have your staff out there, something goes wrong, you need to service it, you need help, you buy into that with the ThinkPad name versus something like, you buy into a Yoga, still a great warranty, but you're not getting that premium level of support. That's one of the things you're paying into with the ThinkPad. So you pay a lot more money than, the most generic, like an IdeaPad, whatever, but you're getting that ThinkPad branding. You're also getting the more robust upgradability, repairability of ThinkPad. You're buying into, I guess, the nostalgia of ThinkPad, all the extra fixings that come with it. It's fair for what it is. The specs are expensive because everything is expensive right now. It's 2026, everything is expensive. It's not Lenovo's fault by any means at all. They are probably very unhappy about this. We can blame NVIDIA, we can blame OpenAI, we can blame the lawmakers, and we can blame Micron, Samsung, and SK Hynix. And all the people who are really gung-ho on AI. All of those people are to blame. These guys are not. So, the prices are up. Yeah, we can bitch and moan in the comments. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't change anything. Everything is up. Prices are up. So relative to prices being up, the one interesting thing is these can actually become more compelling because they already were in the premium block. So if you're going to be paying a premium price for a low-tier laptop, what's the difference between just paying for the better one anyways? So that's, I guess, one thing. The only true negative with these ThinkPads is they're very bad for fingerprints. It's an actual complaint that I have. The traditional ThinkPad being black, kind of from the IBM days, they went against the traditional gray and like beige back then. You can look up the history of ThinkPads. I'm a ThinkPad guy. And they went into the black, which was like taboo back then. But that was a different material. It was more resistant to fingerprints. The modern ones are pretty bad for fingerprints. Neutrals, you don't have as much upgradability. You get one NVMe instead of two because there's the WAN slot. It makes sense. This one here is more consumer focused, so it has two NVMEs. These are more business focused potentially or pro focused, so they have the WAN slot for people who would want cellular access. I can't really critique that. It's more of a neutral because maybe it doesn't appeal to me, but I can fully see why they do it. The lowest screen spec is not good. It's on this one here. It's not that great. So again, but I get why they do it because it keeps the costs down. Neither of these have the bad screen. This one does, and potentially keeps the cost down. So I get why they do it. It's not the negative, it's more of a neutral. Okay, so that's the real neutrals, I guess. Positives now. Speakers, big improvement this year. Huge improvement over the previous generation. Fantastic. Best-in-class keyboard, unchanged from the previous generation. The keyboard, track point. If you like that, then you're going to love it. It's just a track point. The thermals are good. The performance is outstanding. The CPU is incredibly performant, same as this, but now it's more efficient. So you get the same type of raw CPU performance, but it uses less watts to get there. It idles lower, cooler, runs cooler in general. You do have access to awesome iGPU if you get the B390, the Intel B390, you get that awesome iGPU. I have tons of experience with it now. I can truly say it's an awesome iGPU. Or you can get into the Blackwell 500 or the 1000. On that note, I don't really recommend the Blackwell 500. If it's a good price, sure, but I do recommend the 1000 or the iGPU, the B390. Both are very good. I think those are the streams you should go. Go for the B390. You're going to get such good efficiency, or go for the Blackwell 1000 if you need the NVIDIA features, which they exist and they are real, but they're both good. 500 is a little weird. CPU performance great, like I already said. Battery life is huge improvement over this year. They always were relatively low powered. They were always pretty good on battery. Arrow Lake always was good, 3.5 to 4 watts idle on the CPU, plus the other component, screen, all that kind of stuff. You can easily get 8 to 10, even 12 hours out of a laptop. No problem, especially with the big battery. But here, the CPU only idles at like half a watt, maybe 1 at most. And when you do a task, it goes back to that quickly. So the battery life is crazy good. Most of the battery is actually consumed by the screen, honestly. So generally speaking, if you went with the lower screen, the 1200p, which is one selling feature, is why I can't give it a negative, one selling feature of the 1200p, it's a dimmer screen, it's not as powerful, it's lower resolution, not as high refresh. It'll last even more for battery. Generally speaking though, you're going to get multi-day battery, whereas this was like a day battery, even with the lower battery size. This is multi-day battery. Use it all day for 8 hours, you still have probably half your battery life, unless you are literally rendering videos or hitting code compile for 8 hours. Of course it's going to burn faster because you're burning 35 watts on that CPU. But if you're just using the laptop normally, even doing some of those tasks briefly in and out, you will easily get multi-day battery. There's no scenario in which you shouldn't get a full day's battery on this thing doing standard work. Unless you, like I said, unless you are gaming on it or doing code compile for hours, there's no scenario other than those where you should get under 1 day full day battery. It's impossible. You should ideally be getting multi-day battery. Plug it in, charge it up, take it with you. Next day, you're still on battery. Easily, you're flying from New York City all the way to Australia or something like that, right? That's probably almost the longest flight you can find. Yeah, it'll last the whole time. It'll literally last the whole time. So whether you justify of something like this, it's your choice. Do you need the dedicated graphics being much better, the iGPU being much better, better screen options, that kind of stuff? It's your choice. If you just want a ThinkPad, and you just want to type up essays and do work and get all the ThinkPad stuff, the E-series is very good this year. 2025, I guess probably almost to the end of 2026 before they launch this again. So I'd kind of also call it a 2026 model. It's going to be a killer laptop. And then of course we have the P-series. They're always great. Yeah, they're just nice laptops. I think they're fantastic. Either way, solid review, I think. Pick the one you want. I can't tell you which one to buy. I hope I gave you guys enough information to choose the one you want, but they're all great. They're all great laptops.